and communities can get involved in safeguarding water systems.
That will never be done.
Please join me in welcoming our panelists and moderator, Chelsea T. Hicks, an Osage News reporter who has reported extensively on local water issues.
I want to introduce our panelists. We have Tom Ashmore, a boots-on-the-ground water protector who works for the nation. Please come up, Tom. We also have Alex DeRoin, a grassroots Two-Spirit activist and organizer. Please come on up, Alex. And thirdly, Charlotte Robbins, a water protector of the Kayanichi, working in cultural preservation and environmental resources. Please welcome Charlotte Robbins, and keep your applause going all the way to the stage. So, I know that water protection is something that I heard of, I think, for the first time with Standing Rock, and just talking with Osages about it. At the time, it was kind of a split response, and it took time to process, like, what's our relationality to practices such as water protection? In what ways could we be a water protector? And so I want to ask each of you, who invited you to water protection, or how did you learn about it? Put in another way, what's your framework for approaching water protection? What are the tools in your toolbox when we talk for you about water protecting? And who taught you this, and how did you first learn about it? And so I'm gonna give this mic now, and y'all can just pass it.
All right, so I'm Tom Ashmore. I know several of you in this room, or I've met you. But I've been living here in Osage County with my family for 11 years now. And I started out in Chief's office and learned many important things, met many important people. But my degree was in environmental science. And so that's a sort of a broad degree. So I know a little bit about a lot of different topics, essentially. But in college, I really excelled in the aquatic biologies and things of that nature, and I really had a passion for water. But anyways, after I graduated, I should say, from working in executive to now I work in the Department of Natural Resources, have for 10 years. I started in the SDCC program, which stands for Spill Prevention, Control, and Countermeasure. And that has a lot to do with water. It's industrial runoff, oil, salt water, things like that. So that's where the boots on the ground identification for me comes from. We go out there, if there's a spill, we would go out to whatever lease in any part of this county and assess the situation, call in the authorities, have our presence there, and just help really be a part of facilitating the cleanup and the prevention of all of that. After I did that for 5 years, I was asked by my director, Craig here, who gave a really wonderful presentation earlier. I was asked by him to take on the water program for the nation. And so I was happy to do that. Again, water is a part of who we are as Osage people. I get emotional thinking about it because it takes me back to my mother, who really, as a young man, as a boy, really, she was the first person to tell me who I am, which is, as an Osage people, we are water people. So I've always known that, and I've always had this special relationship, whether it's vacations. I didn't go to Disneyland or, what have you growing up. We went to the Blue Hole in New Mexico, or we went to Turner Falls.
Been there,
So water has always been just part of my life. And Neo Konska, children of the mineral waters, that's who we are. I've had that instilled in me since I was a little boy. So taking this job as the water specialist was a natural, obvious yes. And through that, what I do, the tools I have, under the Water 106 program, we are able to go out under the direction of the EPA to monitor. We have several sites. Specifically right now I'm monitoring 17 sites from the northernmost part of Osage County to the southernmost part, east and west. The Caney River, the Arkansas River, we do Bird Creek, Salt Creek, Sand Creek, Buck Creek, North Bird, South Bird. We have all these sites that we monitor on a monthly basis. And so we have different water parameters. Without getting too specific, I'll leave that for maybe a little further. I'll let these guys have a turn. But we monitor for all these different things in these creeks. Just to know if there's any contamination. I mean, right? We have all this industrial stuff. We have farming. We have oil production. So we're there, boots on the ground, seeing this stuff monthly, the wildlife, things that may or may not be affected by it. So I have access to high tech, if you will, water monitoring equipment. We have a lab where we take our water samples back to and process them. And we also have outreach to even bigger labs or other entities that can help us. PFAS is a big one nowadays, so not to throw that out there. But that's me in a nutshell. Thank you guys.
Hello, Huawei. A lot of you guys already know who I am. For those that don't, my name is Alex DeRoin. Come from the Hominy Village, from the DeRoin family, Overly family, St. John and Jake families. Grew up around that dances, around that arbor, and kind of answer the question, everything. What are my toolkits? What led me to this life of water activism? What led me to, do all these different things? And, first and foremost, it was, this background growing up in this Osage culture. My grandpa, whenever we'd go to dinners, we'd go to funeral services or anywhere, always make sure we drank that water. And he always told me, that water's a prayer. A lot of you guys in here that, are part of our culture, you guys know that. So I don't really have to go that deep into that, but, that was the beginning of it. Knowing that water's a prayer, I didn't really know the odds and ends of it all as a kid, but as I grew up, and as I went through life, I found myself in an addiction problem. When I started trying to alleviate that problem, I found my way in sobriety. And one of the tools that I used to reorient my life and to get this activism going was recognizing that faith without works is dead. And I can call that water a prayer all day, but if I don't protect that water, make sure that water is actually pure, and do that work, then it's nothing, And that's kind of where it all started. I started working for our primary residential treatment facility here for the Osage Nation. And we have a sweat out there we do every Wednesday for our clients. And being a part of that sweat and going in there and learning to have that relationship with God through, those lava rocks and that water and the blending of all those elements, that's what made this part of my higher power that I needed to be able to stay sober, and that sobriety and that AA. There's a symbol in there, an iconic element in there. They have a triangle with a circle. One side of that triangle is unity. Unity to me meant that, I had to be able to be confident in myself as an Osage person, as a two-spirit person, and that means being confident in that prayer too, with that water. So that was that first part, gaining that relationship with that water again. Then that second part of that triangle is service. Going back, taking what you learned with that unity and being able to make yourself useful in our community and our culture. And that's what this comes into. It's where this water zine came from. It was my attempt at, making myself useful by sharing, what Osages felt their relationship with water is. When you look through this zine, you'll see all kinds of poems, pictures, paintings, the whole 9 yards depicting our very deep relationship with that water. And then in the sense of all that, when I got those two things out of the way of that triangle, then that last piece was that recovery. When I started doing that, when I started working these ways, working these steps, it gave back to me. give back to me in more ways than I ever thought it would. Somehow, some way, even found God and all that too. And I think that's because, we as Osage, we have a word called Wahoing. And I look at everything through that lens of Wahoing. I look at everything like it's interconnected. And that water is no different. We call ourselves Neokoska. We come from the water. Water is the cornerstone of human existence. Not just Osages, it's for everybody. And whenever I start seeing that and start doing this work, that recovery part of that triangle becomes very clear. Somewhere along the way I got sober, and somewhere along the way, I'm working for this water, and this water works for me. That water is there for me. Every time I'm always talking about these kind of things, from rematuration retreats to circle cinema at a showing, it's always raining. Water's always there for me. So, that's part of it too. And that's my toolkit. That's what keeps me going. That's why I care so much about these things and why I make art about it. Because if I can make art about it and get you guys to empathize with it just a little bit, then it might change your heart and get you to get past that passive fear or passive worry of the water and actually get out there and put your boots on the ground like this guy just said. So, that's what made me here, it's what brought me here, and I'm just glad to be able to share my voice with you guys. Thank you.
Halito from the Choctaw Nation. My name's Charlotte Robbins. I grew up right alongside the river, and for 6 generations, my white family has also lived along the Kindness River. So I'm Choctaw and Cherokee, registered Cherokee, living in the Choctaw Nation. And what my tie, I've always had a great tie to the river. It's where I went to pray. It's where my grandmother took me. It's where we hunted. It's where we fished. It's where we had our cabin. I always knew the importance of water being brought up in southeast Oklahoma and what it meant to our way of life. Again, from hunting, fishing, raising cattle, everything that we did, that river running through that valley is our lifeline. So I moved away as an adult, like most of us do, from our hometown. I went to the big city of Tulsa for 22 years, worked in Tulsa, and my boys went off to college. And I was going home, and my dad was getting older, and we had a lot of family land. And it was, hey, Dad, did you know this? And hey, Dad, did you know the fence is down? And so as I was getting involved, I was talking to my neighbors, and they were telling me, hey, did you know that there's a proposition for a hydroelectric plant? No way. That's not going to happen here. And sure enough, it was true, and it went through the process for a multitude of years. It was going to take our family land by eminent domain. And I couldn't get help. We're in far southeast Oklahoma. We don't have news media. I wasn't getting the support of our tribe in the beginning of the first one. And so we made a documentary movie, but my point was, you're taking my family land, everything that makes us who we are, as people from that valley was going to be taken from us. So starting a grassroots campaign of neighbor to neighbor and going out and saying, what makes your land special? Do you have a freshwater spring? Do you find arrowheads? Is there a pre-contact archaeological site here? Do you have a historic location? Anything over 50 years old is a historic location. Let's start documenting those things. And as we started documenting, you can see, in the documentary this evening that you guys are going to be watching, what that process has looked like over the course of 8 years now. And we're finally sitting in a place where I think in 6 months I located 46 historical and archaeological sites along our river to get protection. So there is something that each individual person can do, whether you're connected to your tribe, whether you're connected to your state. You as an individual can make a huge difference. But don't think, I'm looking at you all as Osage people, and I'm a native too, don't think my tribe's going to do this for me. My tribal government's going to protect me. That is not the way you should look at this. Every single one of you had a vested interest to go and make a difference. Go talk to your tribal council. If you don't want your water used as a resource and sold, if you want your water protected, talk to your tribal council. There are things that you can do. There are ways that you can protect your waterways within your tribal nation. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but there's a multitude of different things that you can do to, as a tribe, to stand on your sovereignty. And that's what really needs to happen. As a sovereign nation, the Osage should look at the water as a source, not a resource. So, a little thing to think about when we're going through this is, do you know where your water comes from? When you turn on your tap, where does that water come from?
That's good. That's good.
Is it working? All right. I love what each and every one of you said, that, you know, we can look for things we can do. We can call our tribal representatives. We can pray with water. We can reflect on the ancestral meaning of water and its our identity in water, and take our boots onto the ground. I don't know, but to facilitate the reflection of, you know, everybody here, I'll briefly share too that I learned through the word when they say indigenous science or indigenous technologies, that we know that sometimes Western science will validate these things that tribal ways tell us. And so Vida Austin is a scientist that, if you want to look up more about that validation of Western science, of that indigenous knowledge, Vida Austin has done a lot of research work into what happens when we talk to water, the ways that it responds in patterns and images. And so I'm wondering to ask all of you, you know, if we do talk with water, pray with water, try to question what could we do to engage with the water around us, what are our sovereign rights and our sovereign possibilities as a tribe, what are our options as citizens, what do you all see as being that next step? Like, let's say this scenario that you're going down to Bird Creek, you're thinking about it, you see some of the trash in the water, you may be picking it up, you may be praying or talking to water like as a sort of a female entity, like Mother Earth is a motherly or female entity, and you're trying to pray and think about that for yourself. What do you all see as kind of like a next step? Because we are, through no fault of our own, we are disconnected from water and land in our daily life. That's our reality. So to go and take a step to correct that is quite a lot. And in going from that mentality adjustment, what is the next step? What are some of the things that you want to invite people to do? What do you want to see people do? Ideally, what do you hope everyone in this room might be empowered to do about water from your perspective? Does one of you want to start first? I don't want to impose a sequence on you.
I can start. So that was, so we're talking about essentially being stewards of the land and of the water. And so to start that, you have to start with your kids. And that seems pretty straightforward to me. And that's one of the benefits that we have here for being Native peoples. We hold our children to a higher regard. So we do a lot of things with our kids, and people do everywhere. But I think as Osages, we do it a lot more. And so I think just really instilling that that support with our kids at home, and especially taking them out to the water, right? You got to be a part of the water. You got to share that with them. They have to be out there, or even just swimming pools. Just having that relationship with the water. You got to establish that first, and show them the bad spots. Show them the horrible fish kills and all of that. You have to expose these people young, and so that's where I would start with it. And then also have these cleanup days, whether it's just personal with your kids, your grandkids, or holding an event, which is again one of the luxuries I have working here at the nation is I have the ability to organize these things on a broader scale. And so these types of things are important. That's where I would start, is with our kids.
Yeah, to kind of bounce off what he said, I agree full blown that everything starts with our kids. Somebody said earlier that water conservation is important because water problems are passed down to the next generations. And that's something that I took very seriously when I heard that this morning. And that's where this all begins, is teaching these kids how to, well, at least from an indigenous perspective too, give them that relationship to that water, teach them why it's important to know where that water comes from, teach them the history that's tied to these bodies of water, not just in now, but where we came from too. The water of your homeland, the water that, eventually gets its way down here from all the way to Missouri, And that's something I think is very important that we start off with. And even then, keep it going even further with cultivating that relationship with your inner child too. Getting out there, go talking to that water, going and, praying with it, and all those things like Chelsea's already said. Because at the end of the day, the longer that we allow ourselves to talk about this relative like it's a resource, the longer we thingify this relative and we don't figure out ways to think of alternatives, the longer these things are going to keep on going. And, that's something I feel like it starts there. It starts with addressing your inner child and then giving it to the next generation too. Teaching them how to go pray, teaching them the importance of all those things. Like my grandpa said to me, like what I said earlier, it starts with that. It starts with that language. It starts with all those things. It makes me think of what Chris Cote recently said in one of his videos on why it's important to know your language too. To me, knowing your language, land back, language back, water back, all those things are all interconnected. And to me, it starts with yourself. It starts with how much do you value, these relatives? How much do you value our way of life? Are you going to put these ways in God first or not? And that's kind of the way that, I kind of imagine it myself.
I'm not going to argue with the guys. The same thing. Like, if we don't teach our children to have a personal relationship with nature and with water, we're doing a huge disservice. I was brought up with that relationship, and you can't ask somebody to fight for something that they don't have a personal tie to. So expecting the next generation to care like we care, like the three of us, we were introduced very young from a cultural side. This is where we come to pray. This is where you talk to God. This is where you find yourself. Those things happen around water. They happen at the river. They happen in the woods. And if we don't teach this next generation to have a relationship with the natural world and realize that we're a part of a much bigger picture, we're not here to dominate everything. We should be sharing these things. And we're not. And if we don't change that vocabulary right now and get these kids to have a vested interest, the next several generations are going to look worse than this.
I'm going to add one more thing here. It's not just the kids as well. I've been out on just inviting college students, undergrads, students work on their capstone projects. So older people are definitely invited as well. And I've actually had people come out with us just to see what I do on a water reconnaissance normal day. And one individual was like, you know what, I had so much fun, I learned so much today, I'm changing my degree, I'm going to do environmental science just like you. And so that was like a really heartwarming thing, but you can change people's lives no matter how old they are. I just like to add that.
I think that's a good place to go next, is to build awareness and share awareness, because that's one of the big things we're doing today. And to hear from each of you two things. What are some of the things that you have seen and observed in your water protection work that others here may not have seen themselves yet or know about yet, that they might want to know more about? So that's the first thing. If you could share some of the things that you've seen and come across that you wish more people would know, as well as what's one barrier that you see in the way to people being able to connect to witnessing that with you and joining and kind of moving to that step of protecting water. So let's hear about some of the things that you've witnessed and come across and you hope that these folks will know more about as well.
Well, I can come up with a rather specific and concrete example. Just here recently, I was, one of my sites that I monitor sample water from is Hominy Creek, and that's just east of the prison in Hominy, the industrial, or the Carnes correctional facility. Anyways, I was out there and I was walking around because we had a spike in one of our water parameters and we were trying to figure out where it's coming from. Anyways, walking that creek up, I never would have seen it. I was walking up the creek and in the water, it's out of my wheelhouse. So I looked at the water and the immediate thought of my mind sounds rather dumb, but when they were swimming, I was like, oh, we don't have alligators. What is that? I looked again closer, and it was a family of otters swimming up the creek. And so that's just one of those things that I know as fishermen, some people here, we've seen these otters in our lakes here locally. A few of us have, but not many people understand that otters have started making a really good comeback. And so that's another especially sacred part of why water is so important to us. We have otters that are living in them right now, so it's important to keep that in mind when we're around water and to not litter. But so that's something that I've seen. Am I along the lines of your question with that?
And then what's that barrier to?
The barrier. So sometimes the barriers can be physical. It's sometimes we don't have the capabilities to explore some of these tributaries. There are barriers as far as county lines and things like that. I've been a part of some investigations where we're investigating some water that's between Osage County and Pawnee or Cleveland or what have you, and that goes into the next jurisdictions, that goes into the state's realm or whoever's part of the next part of it. So from my standpoint, sometimes politics or bureaucracies, those types of things get in the way of being a part of a process of investigations or cleanups or trying to figure out what goes where and who's responsible for what. It can be just as simple as an imaginary line. So I think, again, we get in the way of ourselves when it comes to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the obstacles that I oftentimes come to face with is, people and their willingness to do the next right thing. That's kind of something I've always had to run in with people, my elders, with people even just having conversations about water. Sometimes there's some mixed feelings people can have, because when you have conversations about water, especially when it's so driven by culture, like what we've been talking about this entire time, that internalized phobia of indigeneity, sometimes that can get into conversations, I've noticed. And, doing that next right thing can be very difficult because it means confronting with a lot of those internal traumas that you have, that we have as Indian people when we walk out into this world. And, the other part of it too, the barriers, the real hard barriers, I think a lot of that is, it does go back into a lot of those obstacles. It goes back into whether or not you believe in your sovereignty, it seems like. We can sit here, we can call this water a relative, but unless our government officials, those in seats, are actually supporting those things, then it doesn't actually do anything. And I think that's something I hear it a lot too. I hear it a lot in different spaces, artist spaces, that people in those elected spots, they need to support their youth more. When their youth are out there, stepping up and voicing like I'm doing right now, a lot of the times they're not really received in that way. They're not received in that good way. A lot of times, they're discredited and things like that too. And it makes me think of words that Elder Eddie Redigal said one time during when he was talking about the state of the Osage Nation. He was challenging our government officials to make sure all the things he was talking about that day was being implemented into law. And I think that's something, I try to talk about a lot, is this idea of this right of nature. It was brought up earlier by another one of these panelists, Rebecca, actually. And I think there's a lot of power in that in that right of nature. And especially with Osages, back to that word I used earlier, that Longhorn word. It's a word we use to describe family relations, but it's way deeper than that. It's the most simplistic way you can describe that. And that family relations means a lot, and it makes me think of words by Amy when she says that the water that was turned into milk, that calcified itself to become your teeth up until you're 7, is inside you right now. It knows you, literally. And if water is alive and it knows you enough and is willing to sacrifice itself to be your teeth, why can't you do that? Why can't you go out there and be there for it, take care of it, advocate for it, do the uncomfortable work that, uncomfortable work like getting up in front of a room full of people like right now. So, that's part of it, is doing that next right thing and acknowledging that oftentimes the next right thing is not very comfortable, doing it along the way. And it goes back to a lot of things, that goes back to that data center even that's being proposed right now here in Osage County, we have to talk a little bit about too. What makes data centers so alluring is the comfort it provides people on an everyday basis. The AI that you can use to create any kind of image, the AI you can use to write, a lot of things, provides comfort. And, and that comfort is what makes it so easy and what makes people so complicit to allow these things to happen, to not speak out, to not want to do these different things. And, and that goes back to doing that next right thing, getting out there, arguing, speaking up, arguing for the water, speaking for that water in that good way, and keeping that going and taking care of yourself along the way too, because burnout's real, so.
So some of the things that I wish I would have known, or that I would like you guys to take with you and kind of learn from us a little bit. There are ways that you can get rights of nature policies through your own tribal government. The Osage people can do this. You can protect your water and your waterways through your Osage people, through your tribal government. It can go through your tribal council. It's a very simple process. Sandy and I, she's here, she's in the documentary. We've been working on this with the Choctaw Nation, and we plan to present to our tribal council, who've been aware of it for over a year now, that it's coming and this is what we're working for. So we'll make a formal presentation to our tribal council, knowing that we do have their support very, very soon, and Sandy will be presenting that. So what we're asking of our councilmen is that stop monetizing our water. She's a living thing. If it weren't for her, we wouldn't be here. She's a life-giving source, and let's honor her. Let's honor her as an honorary citizen into the Choctaw Nation. And when we honor her as an honorary citizen, then she can have the same rights as a citizen as any other Choctaw citizen. You can litigate for her through tribal court, not state court, tribal court. And once you set these into place within your own tribe, you don't have to go to the state to get these permissions. It automatically goes to the federal level. Honor this stuff within your tribe first. How can you ask anybody else? How could you ask anybody else to protect the water in your reservation? So press your council for protections for your water. And so I think that was like what I kept coming up against is, well, who owns the water? That water's not owned. That water is not owned by anybody. It's allocated. So start speaking up for your waterways. Talk to your tribal councilmen. Talk to your neighbors. Start recording these sites that are important. Everybody in here has said, we're Osage people. We're water people. We're supposed to be protecting this. You say it, you know it, your council knows it, but do you have it written down? Do you have it written down in your own policies? What are you doing within your tribe to create this verbiage to protect your own water? So if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. So start there. Start in your district with your councilmen, with your neighbors, with your creek, your river. And keep pressing. Don't let them continually dismiss you. And what do we come across the most? People wanting to monetize the river. We're not going to protect it because we might be able to make money in the future. We're not going to protect this lake because we're going to profit off of it. That has to stop. As long as we keep using and utilizing water as a resource, the mentality, this thinking of utilization continues. We need to honor our water. We need to respect our water. We need to consider the water. So I just say start there and don't do what we did and fight the state for years. It's not about fighting. I mean, we fought against everybody, and we were consistently not getting a door open for us. And we were tired and we were out of money, and we had used attorney after attorney and got nowhere until we just threw our hands up and prayed and said, we'll walk through whatever doors opened. And they've continued to open for us, and we have got more protections now than we've ever had. And it's all because of grassroots campaign, not because of our elected officials, because of our neighbors, our friends, our sisters. This has been a women-led grassroots project for years now. And it spread like wildfire. So I think when you see the documentary tonight, you can see what we've done and how hard we worked and the people that we pulled in. And we couldn't do it alone. I don't have the resources that you have or you have. We're all good at something different, but we can all bring something to the table to help. We can all help the water within our reservation. So just think about who you can reach out to, what are their resources, how could they help you. Everybody knows somebody that can help protect your water.
Just real quick, that water is worth the investment risk. So just reminding you guys that.
So I have quite a few more questions, but I want to give plenty of time for each and every one of you who has a burning question to ask it. So I want to let you know that it's 11:40 and we're coming up on a time where you can ask 1:40. Sorry, I have California time on this computer for some reason, even though I've lived in California for 10 years. So, okay, we've come up on this sort of spiritual call here a few times, and I think that we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the integration and the consideration within the economic implications of sovereignty. Not to put you all in that position, but I'm wondering what your thought and your call for your tribal leaders is when we are in an economic system that is not of our own choice, and we have to navigate some of these structures like diversification of income and moving from casino interest into other avenues. What are some of your hopes for how water, I guess let me put the question this way. When I am studying critical indigenous theory at the University of Oklahoma, and we look at definitions of sovereignty, sovereignty is not inherently, in every sense, always land protected, and it's not always having this indigenous worldview. As being an Indian, you have rights through the federal government. It doesn't necessarily mean that you still have the same ancestral land protection practices that we did in the past. And so I'm just wondering what some of your thoughts are on how do we navigate the economic pressures? Like I heard Charlotte saying, say no and you will be blessed. I'm wondering if there's other things that you want to say, and it's almost to the point of, what do you hope everyone in this room would be empowered to do or to know, even given those complex pressures put upon them from their office, from their job, from their seat, from the people that they're, depending on those oil head rights for money. How do you process and think through that? How do you hope your community members and your tribal leaders process and think through that? Is that too unfair of a question? I think it's just a realistic question. How do you grapple with those forces in your own thinking as a water protector?
So grappling with the forces of the powers that be, essentially. How do you navigate that as just a normal person? Where should your concerns lie? There's all these things. I mean, the most important thing behind all that is that water is a finite resource, and everybody's grasping at it. Whether it's so to speak, ill will, or like us here who are trying to protect it. We're all it's finite. It's not for especially the quality of it. The earth tries to renew itself. It does a very good job, but we are, as humans, are very powerful at destroying it. So I think I'm going off on a tangent on that one. I'm trying to figure out how to answer that, but.
It's like, I was asking about our oil. What do you usually do?
With our oil involvement, yeah, that's also another sort of political. So it's hard to answer those questions because there's so many of us here that, especially with us Osage, I come from a family of shareholders, so you get into politics with that question. Do you just tell everybody to go away, or do you welcome? Do you try to find a balance there? And I think that's what I do with my line of work, is I try to find a balance with all of that. There's so much to that question. What do you feel about that, Alex?
Hot potato.
Yeah, I get it. Well, me personally, when I hear that question, I think of the words by Fred Hampton, that we don't need no culture, but revolutionary culture. What exactly is revolutionary culture? It's a culture that's simply going to free you. It makes me think about what he says. We're living in this powers that be. It's like a house fire. When you're in a house fire, what's the only two things you're worried about? Water and escape. And that's, to me, is what I think about. That's why I brought this up here with me, this little Yonkapin. To me, sovereignty is defined by our ability to exist and be able to decide for ourselves outside of colonial powers. That means that, we have food systems that exist outside colonial powers. That means we have water systems outside colonial powers. That means, even for me as a two-spirit person, I can be trans and identify as a queer person outside of colonial powers. That goes into a lot of these things. And, it goes back to what I said earlier, that we are worth that investment risk. This Yonkapin here, it's pretty simple, little bitty guy, little bitty person. And, it started from a simple seed that I was given from somebody. And they told me this exact same thing, that if you really want to change something, you really want to take something good back to your people, feed them. Give them something that's going to keep them alive. And it makes me think of this word by a chief a long time ago, that white people will never understand that money won't keep you alive until there's no more trees, there's no more water, and there's no more animals to eat. And all that's going to be left is money. And you all let me know how well money tastes. So anyways, that to me is how I grapple. I don't argue with them anymore. I just simply create systems outside of, capitalism, which is growing plants. I grow food and I give food away for free, without any profit incentive, without the need to turn this into a commodity or a resource. It is simply a source. And I grew this at the facility that I work for. And we started it last year, this time of year. I went out there and prayed with my sponsor. We prayed over this thing, prayed over this Yonkapin, heard of that facility, and I asked that pod, that original pod, to give me all the things that I need, help me become the Osage that I need to be, and help me be able to figure out how to, exist outside of these colonial narratives. And all it gave me back was this. And to me, I think that's one of the most powerful things, because these Yonkapins, this food, this traditional food of Osage people, this plant has followed us all the way from Missouri, and it has a unique power to it. It can change its genders. And, for somebody like me, that's a lot of implications. It shows that I have an ancestor from the land itself, and valuing this right here more than money, that's all that it takes from me. That's how I rationalize it. I don't get into the arguments over, money and all these different things, because to me, humans aren't rational. If we were rational, we wouldn't be seeking love in all the wrong places. We wouldn't try to, keep on keeping up these systems that harm our relatives. So that's why I try to keep these things going this way. I heard from a poet, a trans poet named Alak, who's Indian from India. He says that the revolution won't be televised. It'll be counterintuitive. It'll be ridiculous. It'll be all the things that white people use to describe magic, medicine, and our original ways of life. And I think that's what this means. I think that's what it means to do these things. We do it because it's what's right. That's all it comes down to, not because it's it's profitable. So that's all I gotta say on that.
So I think it comes with changing the way that we think about it. They're saying the same thing. We're all saying the same thing here. But what type of monetary value can you actually put on water within your reservation? There is only so much water. And what's going to happen when we sell that water? Where are we going to be in a decade? What are the next generation going to drink? And I'm sitting on stage and we're talking about this, but I actually heard in this room today about this data plant. We need the money. There's a lot of ways to make money, folks. A lot of ways. But I haven't seen anybody come up with a way to make more drinking water, more fresh water on this planet. So there's got to be certain things that we value above the almighty dollar. And if you have councilmen that can't see that, you need to think about it for your next council election.
Do we have time for a question? Do you guys have a question? I know it could be a lot. That might be enough. But if you have a question, please.
I have a question. Probably for... I'm afraid it doesn't. Can I just ask him from here? Tom, I know you inspect the water, and I was watching a movie the other day where the grandmother told the little kid to run down the creek and get a bucket of water. The kid pulls the bucket up, sets it down, and they drink out of it. I grew up with a faucet and a hose. I didn't know what a bottle of water was until I became older. But a lot of our elders now, we're experiencing a lot of illness and a lot of sickness, specifically cancer. So my question was, and we hear about boil orders, we hear about unsafe drinking water, even in plastic bottles has, its consequences. But have you had the opportunity, and do they work with you when you go and look at our water treatment plants in the reservations, say Fairfax, when you go and look at Hominy, when you go and look at Pawhuska, and I know they're 100 years old, and they have the same old system of cleaning that water and filling, sending it to the residents, and we pay for that water. There's a lot of cancer going around, a lot of illness and a lot of sickness, but I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look at that. We do need to research and see if there is something coming up quick, our infrastructure, our water treatment plants that need to be upgraded significantly and quickly. So just wanted to know if you've had that opportunity.
Yeah, I have had that opportunity to look at a lot of these treatment facilities, and again, the infrastructure. A lot of it's 100 years old, and a lot of it just we know it needs to be replaced, but it's a monetary thing, and it's unfeasible to do it all at once. So do we even touch it? Do we ignore it? It's not sexy to put a bunch of money into all that, right? So it's one of those things where it is a problem. A lot of these towns, we boomed in the early 1900s, and it was up to date then, but it's not now. Now, having said that, that sounds grim. We are taking steps forward. We are taking steps forward with that. We are currently working on not refurbishing, but getting the Hominy Industrial, the water tower out there. We're getting it into compliance, as well as working towards the lines that come out of it all the way to where it meets the water meter where we buy our water from Hominy, the city of Hominy out there. So we're redoing the sewers and things like that. So we're working towards it. We're edging towards getting ourselves into the 21st century. But having said that, there's still a lot that's not. So I have seen that. To answer your question, I have seen that. And the cancers that are related with that come from, anything from lead, exposure to lead, copper, things like that, as well as the PFAS thing that it's a hot topic. Polyfluoroalkyl substances that primarily comes from everything these days, but there's all kinds of reasons why cancer is very, very prevalent these days. I would say more than ever. Don't have the stats to back that, but it definitely seems like it is. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much to these water protectors. Please put your hands together, and we'll thank them again. We appreciate your leadership in speaking up on difficult topics and the work that you do. Yes. And I know that people are going to be touched by what you said today. So thank you.